All right, everyone, thank you so much for being here today. We are going to go ahead and get started. I know a couple people look like they're still connecting to audio and things like that. But we do kind of need to get started because we do have a lot to go through today. So I want to make sure that we have the time to do that. Feel free to ask questions. You can either take yourself off mute or put them in the chat. Kylie's actually watching the chat feature for me since we're here in the room. So a couple of housekeeping things like I always do. One of the things is we are going to offer continuing education credits. So for those on Zoom, Kylie will be dropping that form in toward the end of the training. So just to let you know that, so we didn't put that in the announcement, but we just thought about it this morning. I've only been doing this for 6 years. I don't know. Don't blame me and don't tell my boss Shelly. So I'm more than willing to share the slides after today's training. So if that's a question, I definitely will do that. We will also share the sign-in sheet as well. So I don't know if that would be accredited to other organizations, but you're welcome to do what you want with that. How we do have this set up, this is the first session. I'm going to go through 5 SOPs with you today. Kylie's going to go through some more SOPs tomorrow. The second session is tomorrow from 11 to 12. So if you haven't signed up for that and you need to, you can email Kylie or I just personally. It's completely fine. We'll take care of that for you instead of you trying to go back through and finding your RSVP. All right. I think that's all the admin things. We'll go ahead and get started. So first off, I always jump in, right? So I'm Debbie Lee. I'm the Assistant Director for iScore RC. We're here today because our Center of Excellence here at CTSI that sits on the Health Science campus went through and, as you know, needs to review standard operating procedures from time to time. So what we're here to do, they currently have 10 currently reviewed, and they will be approved on October the 15th. So you're kind of seeing them ahead of time because we're going to, for those that are CTSI employees, we are going to ask you to do an assessment. Now, mind you, I'm not a tricky trainer, so the questions are not real difficult. We just want to make sure that you actually either attended or watched the video afterwards as well. Okay. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Our first SOP is the COE 101.1, and that's our mission, goals, and governance. Maybe. So our mission and our structure is we want to provide that infrastructure that facilitates participant safety, right, and compliance. We want to make sure it's efficient, that drives that growth of cutting edge clinical research here at WVU. And I do need to clarify, there was a pretty large change to these SOPs because these SOPs now apply to any clinical trial or prospective observational clinical study. And that's on all WVU University campuses, which does include WVU East, Potomac State, and Beckley. So just to let you know that. So a little bit different from the previous SOP. All clinical trials conducted on the Morgantown Health Science campus or affiliated health system must be registered with our Center of Excellence here, and it must be approved as well. And I think Kylie's going to talk tomorrow about the COE registration and what that approval looks like. COE also facilitates use of regulatory systems for clinical trials and management. Once again, that allows us to track that performance, our targets, especially if we have targets with the sponsor. All of that is housed in our clinical trial management system. And then, of course, all of our favorite metrics, right? Who doesn't love metrics? Okay, I might, because I usually do the slides for the metrics sometimes. So, Senior Executive Clinical Research Committee. That's comprised of university leadership and provides advice and guidance. They're routinely informed on the activities of the Center of Excellence. That comes through the TACT committee, and I'm going to talk to you in a couple of slides about what is the TACT committee, and then COE leadership as well. You're sitting in what they do. They either revise current SOPs or they may need to write new SOPs as well. There is a risk assessment committee. When in doubt, we make an acronym, so it's RAC. And it's comprised of university leadership and legal representatives. And they review as needed clinical trials that are deemed of higher risk prior to the COE registration approval being granted. And this is what I promised I told you about the TAC team, which is the Tactical Advisory Committee. They are comprised of members from the Center of Excellence as well as clinical research representatives across the university. So all the different departments here, they are sitting on this committee. And what they do is they establish, promote, and maintain institutional harmonized processes. Because once again, it goes back to the human subject safety. We want to ensure compliance to accepted regulatory requirements and clinical research. And once again, increasing that efficiency. So helping other departments with that as well. So what do we do here? Clinical trials, right? So we refer to ourselves as CTSI-CT. Our team resides within the Center of Excellence at our West Virginia Translational Science Institute, provides the administrative, financial, business coordination, data management, and regulatory infrastructure for investigators as needed. The purpose is to assist with the planning, conduct, and compliance of clinical trials involving medications, devices, or behavioral interventions, including those sponsored by private and public agencies as well. Once again, we also, I say we, but I just coordinate the training part. You all, CTSI members, coordinate, facilitate research, and strive to ensure that institutional research compliance, including financial compliance as well. So what are our goals? Our goals are to facilitate the administrative, regulatory, financial, and business activities necessary to assist investigators in the conduct of clinical research. So we want to assist investigators who wish to offer novel, experiential, therapeutic alternatives for the patients. We want to act as a resource for developing researchers with ideas, support direction and opportunities related to protocol development and research funding. We also want to make sure that we are also assist in making WVU attractive to prospective research faculty and sponsors, right? We want to make sure that we're on that cutting edge that people know about what we're doing here at WVU. And we want to provide resources for clinical research, compliance, and education. So that part I will say I help with the education, myself and Kylie both. So what's the governance? The governance is the Clinical and Translational Science Institute. The COE functions to support research activities of West Virginia, including, once again, that WVU East, Potomac State, and Beckley as well. So we follow guidelines outlined in our West Virginia University Administrative Policies and Procedures, departmental specific policies and procedures as applicable. And then we also follow the West Virginia University Office of Research and Integrity and Compliance. We also comply with applicable federal and state laws, rules, and regulations as well. Okay. Any questions about the first SOP? You're not going to ask me what TAC stands for again? Because I have it written in my notes, just in case. All right. So our next SOP we're going to review is our COE 105, and that's Clinical Research Personnel Responsibilities and Training Program. So responsibilities for all research team members, once again, going back to protecting the rights, the safety, and the welfare of subjects. We want to conduct the clinical study in accordance, once again, we're going back to the approved institutional review board, that study protocol. We also want to follow our federal and state laws, our regulatory requirements, our institutional policies, including but not limited to the protection of confidentiality of all clinical research related information, as well as our good clinical practice guidance, so GCPs, right? You hear Debbie say a lot about GCPs. So responsibilities, once again, for all of us is to comply with those federal regulations, right? governing disclosure of personal, professional, or financial interest in a research study that may impact upon its conduct, evaluation, or outcome. So we want to maintain that confidentiality of all clinical study trial related information, right? That's all of our jobs as we're doing research. Fulfill position requirements specific to the job title and in accordance with the delegation by the principal investigator and according to those appropriate regulations. So if your name is listed on the delegation of duties log and it says that you are going to do the informed consent, making sure that you're fulfilling that position. Ensuring the integrity of the trial related duties and functions performed and any data generated. So what is the responsibility of the principal investigator, right? He or she is the individual of record who is qualified by either education, experience, and appropriate licensure of certification, and assumes the authority and overall responsibility for the conduct of a clinical study in accordance, once again, going back to those federal and state laws as well. And also our regulatory requirements, our institutional policies, and our good clinical practice, right? So once again, as we all say, but sometimes we do have to do reminders that the PI is the ultimate responsible person. And we hear that from the FDA as well. For investigator-initiated trials, both the investigator, so when they're reading, the CRFs and they're going through regulations and it says the investigator and the sponsor responsibilities, if it is an investigator-initiated trial, that's the PI because they're the sponsor and the PI now, so they've got to do both. Once again, that goes back to the safety reporting because if they're working with a sponsor, they're sending those safety response to them. They're sending them on. Once again, if it's investigator initiated, they're the ones doing that. So, and that means to the regulatory agencies and the quality management by establishing, once again, I always say this, that monitoring and auditing plans as needed. I always say have that, just so you know, Amy, I always say have that monitoring and auditing plan up front, right? Does that always happen? No, but we say it, so. And we will help if that comes up as well. They must also ensure all delegated study team members are qualified by education, training, and experience. They need to also ensure the informed consent process is being conducted according to regulations and that the study participants understand the nature of their participation and their risk. Documents a delegation of responsibilities. Once again, they're going to do that on their delegation of duties, or you almost sometimes might hear it as delegation of authority as well. PI has the authority to delegate responsibilities, right? I mean, that PI cannot do everything that you guys do, right? So they do have that responsibility, but they have to make sure that you're trained and you have that, right? I cannot take somebody's blood pressure because I am not trained to do that. So once again, making sure they understand that. But once again, ultimate responsibility for the conduct of the study, right? So they can't, if you're sitting in front of an auditor, they can't say, well, I delegated that to Becky. No, they still need to know what's going on with their study or a sponsor study, I should say, sorry. They also need to make sure there's adequate resources, right? If they're currently on 10 different, if they're the PI of 10 different studies, can they take on another study? Who's going to run that? Do they have coordinators in their shop? Are they coming to us to help with that? Also the proper use and storage of investigational product, right? Have they, made sure the investigational pharmacy has that, or if it's maybe just a device alone, is it being stored here? What does that look like? Ensuring the integrity of the study-related duties and function performed in any data generated as well. And once again, that accurate and prompt safety reporting required by the sponsor and the IRB as well. So they're also responsible for that. Also making sure they meet with sponsors' representatives and the research team as appropriate to discuss planned and ongoing studies, right? The PI shouldn't just come in and say, hey, Karen, this is for you. Hey, Becky, this is for you. You're doing this. And then be like, oh, I'm on vacation for the next 6 months, right? Not saying they can't take vacation, but they need to be that available and making sure they're regularly checking in. Okay. Meeting with auditors, right, at the conclusion of their audits to review those findings as well. So making sure they're available for those as well. So what about the COI? I think I'd rather much be a COI. There was a little shorter. Is an individual member of the clinical trial team. They're, once again, qualified by education. They have experience and, once again, that appropriate licensure or certification to perform study-related procedures or to make study-related decisions as delegated by the PI, right? However, the PI is ultimately responsible for the overall conduct of the study. Once again, making sure. For the investigational pharmacist, once again, those duties are delegated by that principal investigator. That may include, right, doesn't this make sense, the investigational product, receiving it, storing it, preparing it, distributing it when patients come in for their visits. They definitely need to maintain an IP accountability, inventory, and study-related documentation. All right, so what about the research coordinators? You will absolutely help in the participation in development and or organize, sponsor provided aids and checklists to facilitate patient recruitment and enrollment, as well as the collection of complete and accurate study data. Also enroll participants in studies and manage the participation according to, once again, the ethical, regulatory, and protocol-specific requirements. Wait, your slides keep going, so don't think you're done. Okay. In conjunction with your regulatory staff, right? Maintains the regulatory and study files of each research project. Also participates in quality assurance activities, monitoring visits, internal audits, sponsor audits, FDA audits. And then also for the regulatory staff, for regulatory staff, maintains essential documents according to federal regulations. There's our good clinical practice again, and internal processes as well, because we can't forget about the internal processes as well. You're sitting in some internal processes right now with our SOPs, but serves as the also point of contact for your institutional review board of record, because it may not be the IRB here at West Virginia University. So once again, okay, so what are the requirements for training? We do need a current CV on file. It does need to be signed and dated. It does have to be updated every 2 years. Also, if you have a licensure, so for those that might be LPNs, nurses, social workers, making sure you maintain that, making sure if you also have expiration dates on your licensures, making sure that you complete the necessary things to do that. I think I just skipped ahead prior to it being expired. And then once again, that also needs to be updated in Encore for all delegated members as well who are involved in those key study activities. I think, I did the second part already, so make sure you maintain that. Bless you. For personnel conducting human subject research, it shall include, once again, it's a lot of the same things we've talked about, but there is, once again, protecting our patients. There is also the safe handling of hazardous materials, so making sure you're doing that training. And then, of course, we can't forget about our favorite HIPAA, Health Insurance Portable and Accountability Act. And then also don't forget about IT, right? Our information technology, can't share my badge with anybody, things like that, keeping that in mind as well. And our protocol specific training as well. And depending on your role, this slide might go on to the next slide. So don't say just because it's not listed here. Debbie said these are the only things I had to do. Don't come back to me and say that, okay? There could be additional training as well. And then there are additional training opportunities. We do have our Principal Investigator Academy structured curriculum. And then we have periodic training events. I'm looking around, seeing a lot of faces in the room and a lot of faces on Zoom as well, or names on Zoom. You guys regularly come to our clinical trials toolkit series. And that's, once again, helping you grow, sometimes it might be reminders for you, things like that. So making sure you're doing that as well. If anyone is interested in becoming a PI Academy member or even want guest access, please let me know. For the PIs, we do ask, there is a possibility of them obtaining a complete certificate. So for the PIs, but anybody can get guest access that if you're interested in seeing that. We're actually in the process of updating it as well. So yeah. We also offer Kylie offers new hire orientation now. It's available through our Center of Excellence here. It's personnel new to clinical research. We have even had people that have been doing research for like 3 years still attend it because some of the stuff we go through is WVU specific, so it kind of makes sense. Once again, we provide that information. We really do start to finish, how you start and then actually how you finish a clinical trial. So sometimes really good to see that. You can also get your certification through, and this is what I was talking about, maybe other organizations, is the Society of Clinical Research Associates, which is known as SOCRA, or the Association of Clinical Research Professionals is encouraged. If you are a coordinator, that is encouraged for you. So feel free to talk to your supervisor more about that. Okay. We do have this does have a site training record attached to it. It is an attachment to this particular SOP. So if this is something you use on a regular basis, after October or on October 15th and after, make sure you grab this one because it has the new SOP on it, because it's 105.01 now. So make sure you just grab that. I'm sure Michelle and Chad and Shelly will make sure it's out on the portal, but just in case you have one saved somewhere, make sure you go back to get the new one. All right, 3 more. We got it. All right. This is my favorite part, is the informed consent process development and implementation. All right, so what is the procedure for informed consents? The PI shall identify which members of the research team will be obtaining the informed consent. That person obtaining must be qualified, right? And they must have or experience. They have to be trained on the protocol, right? They can't just say, well, I don't know, they read through the informed consent, they seem to understand it, just let them go. No. They have to be trained on the protocol. That also has to be documented as well. And they also have to be delegated on that delegation of duties log as well. So making sure all of those things are hit. And here's a really, really important thing. Ensure the most recent copy of the informed consent is being used. It's IRB approved, right? That's why I'm always caution people when they print out 20 of them at one time. And that's what a great thing about our clinical trial management system is that it puts the new one right at the top for you, so you always know which one's new. So what does it look like to design it, right? We have templates here at WVU. Your IRB of record may have their own template that they want you to use. And then also that collaboration with the sponsor. You might be also working with a clinical research organization or a lead site on a predestined template. So once again, kind of working through that. I've definitely come back and saw, the tracking where there's the red lines to change this word to this. So once again, that's definitely a conversation, or probably emails nowadays much more. The ICF should be appropriate to the study. It does have to have the requirements of the 21 CFR Part 50, which is once again protecting those human subjects in research. It does have to adhere to federal, state, and local laws as well. So for the IRB, they want you to prepare and submit your IRB required documents, and that's going to include your informed consent as well, which must include a key information page and all the information that will be used in the informed consent. So some of those processes are, what's the proposed informed consent method? What's the recruitment? Is there a HIPAA authorization in there as well? Now, does it mean that, it's approved? You can't make any revisions to it? No, you can make revisions to it, but it must be approved by the IRB first, right? You can't just take an informed consent and say, oh, well, we went from 10 studies down to 8. Well, that's great, but that has to go back through the IRB and has to be reapproved. So how do you obtain consent, right? The written consent, so if you're in person, so the SOP kind of does in person, and then it also does if you're not in person, so it kind of goes both paths. So if you're in person, you're going to review the informed consent with participant, right? You want to go through it in its entirety. And that does not mean that you have to read it verbatim. Now, there may be parts that you do want to read verbatim. I don't know. I think about the legal part of it, right? Or maybe a tricky or a really complicated part about how they're going to be randomized or different parts like that. But you can definitely, go through it. But once again, making sure that you're covering all aspects of that informed consent. You want to provide them, adequate time to read and review the document. Ask questions. You can also even assess them. So I just went over how you're going to be randomized. Can you explain to me what does that mean to you? And if they just give you the blank stare, then you need to go over that again or explain it maybe in a different way, right? You also want to make sure that you encourage their input from their family members, right? Or other care providers. If the participant is unable to give consent, you can provide it to their legally authorized representative as well. That's their LAR. Ensure the participant or LAR and investigator designate or delegated staff has personally signed, dated, and put the time on as well. So if that time is still on that template or the time is required for the study that you're on, making sure that you do that as well. And you do want to provide a copy of the signed and dated informed consent to the participant because you're going to take the original and it's going to be filed with the study record and a copy placed in their medical record as well. I think very important for it to be in the medical record. Never know, right? Document the informed consent process. So you can't just do it and you're like, well, we signed the informed consent. You've also got to document it as well. So you want to document that in the participants' records as well. You want to put the date, the time, the ICF was signed after all questions were answered. And the consent was obtained prior to initiation of any study-related activities. And you want to put that a copy of it was also provided to them as well. So. Additional considerations. I did not go through all the information that's in this SOP. So if you are maybe a participant, doesn't speak English or is unable to read or has or is physically challenged, please go out to this SOP and read those parts of it as well. So I just want to make sure I didn't skip over parts of it. Okay. So let's talk about the electronic informed consent, right? How many people love those a lot better than the paper? I was saying a little bit, kind of okay. As a participant, I like it electronically, just saying. But electronic informed consent process may be used to supplement or replace. So you can have both, or you can just have the informed consent. It still has to meet those regulations because we still want to protect our subjects, our human subjects, and our institution requirements as an in-person based informed consent as well. Once again, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to discuss it, verify that the plan is acceptable. Because if you're doing it electronically, you could be on Zoom, you could be sending that to them ahead of time, and then we'll meet together. What does that look like? So that's what that means by that plan. You want to provide their study staff contact information. I know when I've done a study with a department here, I literally got their business card. Like, even though it's in the informed consent, but it's electronic. If something's going on, am I going to remember that it's in my email somewhere? Probably not. So once again, that might be something you want to do, or at least definitely point it out where it's at in the informed consent. The RB submission, it has to have a clear description of electronic media confidentiality protections and timing of the consent process. And the electronic informed consent should be easy to navigate. It should not be a system that you can't figure out how to get the drop down, or things like that. Allow the user to proceed forward and backwards. Because think about a piece of paper, right? I'm like, oh, well, let's go back to page 2. What did it mean here? They should be able to do that as they're doing electronic as well. And it should also allow the user to stop and continue at a later time as well. And I mean, these are all done for you guys. So, but just, once again, just reminding. So what if you're in person, right? So in person, give the opportunity to use either paper or the electronic, because you may be working with an individual that electronics just aren't their thing. So paper's, more sufficient for them or a better option for them. You're going to complete, no offense, I did not rewrite these slides. You're going to complete the same steps you did for the written consent in person. Okay. For the remote, once again, the information may be provided to the participant or the LAR. And you might, do we even use a fax machine anymore? Yeah, no. Okay.
I tried, it doesn't seem to work.
But yeah, so you might fax it to them. I think probably emails, probably better, or the e-consent application as well, to review it prior to you actually doing the consent process with them. It's kind of nice to see it ahead of time. So, because once again, it's going to give them time to review. Yeah, Karen.
I wasn't sure about the,
I am going to go to my panel of experts.
okay.
And that would be Shelley Welch, Michelle Chittister, and I'm not sure if Chad's on. Did you guys hear the question that's in the room?
I did not.
Okay.
It was, are we allowed to send the consent via email for the person to look at?
No, we're not supposed to do that outside of the red cap or the Adveric e-consent application. So regular email is not allowed, but sending it via the applications is allowed.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, my panel of experts.
When you send it
With that application, can they read all of it?
yeah,
So it's just, I've just never seen how it looks.
yeah, they
PDF of it.
Or get the PDF of it.
Thank you. Good question. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. All right. I just have to re-finag my slide here. Okay. Sure. Or not. Okay. Good question. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back and just double check the SOP, because I pulled that from there, but maybe I missed things too. I'm just being honest. And now I'll email everybody. I'm sure it's my fault. So, well, no, because I mean, no offense, I'm not part of the review team for the SOPs, and I'm totally fine with not being part of that team. So I could have missed something.
Okay.
Not what I was hearing.
Oh, well, okay, yeah. The consent review process may be performed by telephone or via media with access to conversation when the participant or the participant's legal authorized representative can read the consent form during the discussion. Once again, having that in front of them is, definitely nice. If a written consent is needed and you're remote, once the informed consent is received by the study team, the investigator or delegated staff shall sign the informed consent in the appropriate area with the current date. So what you wouldn't want to do is tell them, say, oh, we're on this HIPAA compliant Zoom. You sign your copy, I sign my copy. No. They sign their copy, and then they're going to bring it into you at their next visit. So, and then that designated person would sign on the date they receive it, because we do not backdate, because that is not good documentation practices. Just want to point out again that no research activities may occur prior to receipt of the signed informed consent. If you wonder why that's listed over and over again, just go out and read some of the FDA warning letters. Okay, that is when I see them, that's a big thing for the warning letters, so. All right, if it's a paper form, I totally jumped ahead. Like I just said, they're gonna bring it back into you at their next visit. They can mail it back as well, if that's how you guys have it set up, or bring it to the next visit. I just literally said that entire slide. I am so sorry. So, okay. Exceptions from general requirements. All right. So there is the consent of children, right? There's different state laws around that, things like that. There's also the waiver of informed consent in emergency situations, and also exception for emergency research. Once again, I did not put all of this in here, so please, once again, look at that SOP for additional details, okay? Any other questions about this SOP?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Becky and I today were doing a consent and the gentleman we were consenting had a really hard time using his hands. I think that was brought up, like they had physical issues with signing. What is usually the procedure if someone can't use their hands to sign? Is that like protocol specific or,
And he did have a medical power attorney in the room. I mean,
he was able to do it, it was just kind of a scribble. But I was like, what if he absolutely wasn't
Yeah.
even able to give us a scribble?
he did scribble, but.
Yeah, I mean, I would take at least a scribble, and then, and Michelle can chime in as well, but a witness to that it was the patient's mark.
So, I'm not Michelle, but in my former life as a social worker, when I worked at Ruby Memorial Hospital, we had to have patients sign stuff that weren't able to sign all the time. And what we were instructed to do was, if they are able to put their mark, then we would mark it and, or they would mark it. And then we, like you said, Shelley, we would sign as the witness.
From my memory, Ruby,
Yes.
like I had a patient once who was paralyzed from the neck down and couldn't mark. So it would be, I would witness and then I would bring in a third party, like maybe a nurse or physical therapist or physician to witness and sign as well. But then that was like a third party witnessing that consent was happening. I'm not sure if we have anything in our, like policies here about that.
It looks like Michelle is coming off mute.
So typically, I would say that if the person is not able to sign, you would need some documentation that they weren't able to sign, and also a witness who would not be the coordinator that was consenting, but maybe a nurse or a family member that could also sign the consent form.
Makes sense.
Good questions. Good conversation.
Yeah, it just happened to sort of come up today. We were able to get a scribble, thankfully. We didn't have a moment of panic, like what do we do?
Yeah, and what timing too, right? What timing? Good. Good questions. All right, any other questions or comments? We have two more. Just stay with me a little longer. Okay. All right. I'm just saying, if you show, for those that came in person, we did give out candy. Because Debbie, I always have candy. Not advance the screen. What did I do now?
To kind of minimize that whole,
This whole thing.
yeah, pull down.
What do you want me to do? Sorry, technical difficulties. Know what I did. Oh, okay, thank you. All right, thanks, Kylie. That's why we're a team. Oh, I could have done that too. Okay, anyways. So just some revisions as well, the informed consent and any other written information to be provided to those participants, right? Can be revised whenever important new information becomes available that may be relevant to the participant's consent, right? Once again, any revised written informed consent should receive IRB approval prior to that use. And that participant or LAR should be informed in a timely manner. And the study team should work with the PI and the IRB to determine who needs to be reconsented as well, because that's, you know, part of that process when a new informed consent comes out as well. Okay. I'm going to tell you this one's going to go real fast. So if you're watching the time, this is going to go fast. So external safety reports. So the receipt and review process, you do want to communicate this SOP to your sponsor prior to study initiation, for example, during the contract negotiations or your site quality qualification and or initiation visit. So making sure that you do provide them with this SOP. Because investigators will only review and retain retain individual safety reports distributed by external sponsors that are determined by the sponsor to be unanticipated problems as is described below. So it's unexpected and it's related or possibly related to participation in the research, and serious or otherwise one that suggests the research places subjects or others at a greater risk of physical or psychological harm that was previously known or recognized. And there are implications for the conduct of the research study, such as requiring significant and usually safety related changes to the protocol, such as revising inclusion and exclusion criteria, or including a new monitoring requirement, informed consent, or investigator brochure. So that's maintained within the respective study financial files as well. Study reports that do not meet those criteria that was outlined above will not be reviewed nor retained by the PI. So once again, very, very important for your sponsors to know what's going to be reviewed and what's going to be filed as well. So for reporting, individual reports that do not meet the criteria that was listed in the previous slides does meet that, just to make sure I say that correctly, will be reviewed by the PI, reported to and reviewed by the IRB, and maintained in the study files. Once again, there's those summary reports distributed by external sponsors and accepted for review, and routine reporting to the IRB as applicable. They should have, for retaining, there should be a file outside your safety reports meeting the above criteria. So for example, if you have a reportable UPERTSO, that's the one time I'd rather say the words than the acronym in the study regulatory file along with corresponding IRB documentation. So just remember, if you're starting up a new study with a sponsor, go and get this SOP and make sure you're providing it to them. All right, told you. Shoo! All right. How am I doing on time? All right, I got 15 minutes. Oh, because you never know how it's going to go. Sorry, just being honest. So let's talk about data management, security, confidentiality, sharing, transmission, and archiving. Woo, that's a lot. So during the conduct of clinical trials, it's essential study-related documentation is generated, collected, and maintained. And we want to demonstrate the compliance of data management with the standards of good clinical practices, and with all applicable regulatory requirements as well. So documents, whether paper or electronic, should be recorded, handled, and maintained in a manner that allows, right? Accurate reporting, interpretation, verification. Where is that original case report form that was entered into the EDC? Once again, going back and making sure. Because, oh, Lordy, I am so sorry. That is really small on your side. I can see Shelley Welch right now. She's very close to the screen, I'm sure. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I can't see it.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. When I did it on my screen and my monitor for someone that wears readers, I could see it. So I truly, truly apologize about that. I was just trying to find a new way to display.
I like it.
Yeah, I do like it, but it's not the best. So sorry about that. We see our colors all the time, right? So I was trying to do a different image. Note to self, just leave it as is. So I think we all know, and this might be important when you take your quiz, it's attributable, right? it has a sign-in date, a recording data. Once again, that's why it's very, very important not to allow others to have your username and password, because as we all know, there's that audit trail behind. It says exactly when Debbie Lee logged in, what Debbie Lee changed, things like that. And when I log out as well, all of that's captured. Things are legible. This would be the second little thing if you can't see it. Once again, using permanent ink, right? Blue or black. No pink sparkle pens, just blue or black. That single line through initial and date because guess what? We're human too. We talk about the protection of our subjects, but we're also human. Mistakes happen. But instead of scribbling through, one line through initial and date. Contemporaneous, record the date at the time the data is generated or observed. Don't rely on your memory. I can't even tell you what I ate yesterday, so don't rely on my memory and shouldn't rely on your own. So try, record it in the moment when it's happening or right after the visit, so that's fresh in your mind. Also contemporaneous, this is also where we get not backdating. So making sure you're putting the correct actual date. Items are accurate, right? They're accurately entered and completely reported on all data, required data. What you don't want to do is to what's called test into compliance. So you keep doing it till you get to the value that it's supposed to be at. So making sure, that first test that you do, that is your test. Consistent. Primary means, that ensuring data is chronologically, has a date and time stamp. Once again, when you're logging into your into your systems, that's capturing that for you. But thinking about if you have that in your binder, what does that look like? Enduring. So it emphasizes on ensuring data is available long after it's recorded, even decades in some situations. So making sure, that's why you should also have disaster recovery plans as well, right? Also not my favorite SOP to write at my previous employment, because that's just not something I can do. I don't know why, but things are available, right? Thinking about, okay, so we get these electronic case report forms. How are we going to receive them back from the sponsor? Are they going to be on a CD? Does anybody have CD readers anymore? Right? So kind of thinking about it, and that's stuff that you should be talking if you're working with a sponsor, or if it's investigator-initiated clinical trials, or kind of thinking through that as you're going through. So, okay. Data security, electronic records. Electronic technology used to enter or access study data should have the appropriate security measures installed. It also shall only be stored on secure systems or servers that meet security guidelines. Have access limited to authorized personnel and are backed up, right? So that's why it's so important that only certain people have access to certain things, right? My name is not listed on any delegation of duties log, so therefore I should not have access to any data. And I don't. Please no, I do not. So once again, because the study databases should have an audit trail for any revisions made to electronic data after that initial. And you don't see that. You don't see that on your end when you're in that system, but trust me, it's there. Okay? Well, don't just trust me, you can trust the audit person too, seeing it, so. Data security, right? Paper records, right? How many people love paper records? No, right? It's a lot. Documents should be maintained in a secure location with limited access throughout the conduct of the clinical study. And that's why it's so important. I know Amy was working on some paper documents right before this training. She went and put them all back. So they are secure while she's sitting in here in this training. She's like, I wish I wouldn't have walked past your door now. So confidentiality, all source documents containing protected health information so that PHI must be kept confidential per institutional policies. This includes but not limited to medical records, subject diaries, lab reports, progress reports, signed informed consents. And that's why and you might not like me for this, I really liked when our copier system changed. Because now we have to have a badge to be able to print our items. I personally like that a lot better. Personally, you can give me daggers, it's okay. So But sharing, due to the sensitive and personal information regarding the research participant, data shall be shared in a manner that protects the participant's privacy and confidentiality. And this is always, I've never not seen it in your informed consent too, right? Who you're going to share that with. But you do want to manage that access to PHI. So once again, if somebody comes off the study, they have a stop date on their delegation of duties log, do we also take away their access to this folder, this door, whatever that looks like? Details related to PHI sharing must be included within the IRB approved consent. You would think I practiced these or something because I jump ahead. Each participant has consented to direct access to his or her medical records or trial-related records for monitoring, audits, IRB or IEC review, and regulatory inspection as well. Prior to transferring to offsite, because can we store everything just here in our CTSI office? Can any department at WV do that? No. That data should be redacted and remove all the participants' personal identifiers unless using an approved method of transferring data. So for transmission, you want to protect the confidentiality of the research participant. A secured process shall be used for both internal and external. Because once again, how are you getting those records to you? What does that look like? How is that secure? Because once again, we want to protect that information. Archiving. An investigator is responsible for securely maintaining all essential documents, including the research data. Once again, we're going to go by our West Virginia University record retention policies for human subject research. I did put a link there. It's also linked in the SOP, so you're welcome to read that. It is the responsibility of the sponsor to inform the investigator institute in writing of the requirements for that retention when the documents no longer need to be retained. And that is prior to destroying those records. A confirmation for that destruction must be received from the study sponsor, right? Don't want to do that until you have that in writing. For FDA regulated studies with a WVU sponsor investigator, a note, unless specifies otherwise, so if it's drug or biological, an investigator shall retain records for a period of 2 years, unless specified otherwise in a written agreement, following the date of the marketing application is approved for a drug indication being investigated. Or if no application is being filed, or if the application has not been approved for such indication until 2 years after that investigation is discontinued and FDA is notified as well. Okay. So making sure you hit all those points. If it's a device, an investigator or sponsor shall maintain the records for, once again, that period of 2 years, unless specified otherwise in that written agreement after the latter of the following dates. So the date on which the investigation is terminated or completed, or the date that the records are no longer required for purposes of supporting a pre-market approval application or a notice of completion of a product development protocol. I don't know about hearing that, but that was a lot to say. So, all right, for federally funded. So for example, National Institutes of Health, right? We're very familiar with them. Investigator-initiated research not under regulatory agency approval. Those study documents will be maintained for a minimum of 3 years from the date of that submission of the final expenditure report. Thank you. Or for awards that are renewed quarterly or annually from the date of the submission of the quarterly or annually financial report. All right, any questions on this SOP before I go over just 2 brief admin items? I'm assuming Kylie, because I know she's great, has dropped your CE form in there.
I will also say, kind of going back a few conversations when we were discussing signing and what to do, Tara also did put in the chat that they were notaries at the time, so signing is why signing. So that is why the social workers were able to be the witness. So if I come back to help you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. We will, for maybe your colleagues, or maybe even you, we will have this video and tomorrow's video as well posted by Monday, September 29th. For those that are required to do the assessments, And then that way you have until October 15th. We try to give you as much time as needed. Once again, the assessment questions, I don't think they're tricky. I just want to make sure that you attended or listened to the video, if that makes sense. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone on Zoom. I appreciate people being in the room with me as well. But thank you, everyone. Have a great day.